If you tuned in last week, we talked to Trey Rogers, arguably one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to athletic fields and turf grass. If you watched even one match of this year's World Cup, Trey and his team are responsible for getting those natural grass fields to each stadium and then keeping them maintained and intact while the games happen. He's essentially the invisible architect of the playing surface at the most watched sporting event on Earth these next few weeks. And few people tuning in have ever heard his name. The players who won on his grass probably don't know his name either. And that got me thinking about people like Trey. People who bring us our favorite sports and our favorite moments, and we don't even realize it. They're the hidden figures, and in a lot of cases, they're not the exception, they're the rule. Think about what it actually takes to run a professional sports team. There's the trainers, the equipment staff, the video coordinators, the scouts, the practice squad players, everyone who shows up every day and get beaten up so the starters can get ready. Or these are the people whose entire career is one specific skill that gets deployed a few times a game, if that. There are people who have trained for years for a moment that may never come. There are people in the bleachers watching through binoculars. There are people in the locker room with a Q-tip and 60 seconds. These unseen heroes are everywhere, to be fair. In corporate America, in retail, in hospitality. To me, though, sports has gotten extremely good at finding that one person who can do one very specific thing brilliantly. The infrastructure of professional sports is basically an ongoing experiment in human specialization, and some of the results are wild. There's a cricket role that translates roughly to the human sacrifice. There's an NHL job that was held most memorably by a 36-year-old accountant from Oak Park, Illinois. There's a lacrosse position that was so dominant the NCAA banned it for a year and then had to bring it back because nothing worked without it. I wanted to find more people like Trey, or at least more positions like his. And that is what today's episode is all about. We're going to be looking at several different sports with wildly unique roles that you probably never knew. Some of these are positions on the field, some are on the roster, but almost never on the field. One isn't a player at all. And a few of these stories I found, I think, are more interesting than anything the pro athletes are doing. These people and positions, they don't just support the stars. They make them possible. And there's a difference. Take these people away, and you don't just have a worse team. You have a fundamentally different sport. Let's get into it. We're starting in the NFL, American football. And specifically, we're going to the part of football that most casual fans barely watch, special teams. For those who need a refresher, special teams is the group of players that come on the field for kicking plays. This can be punts, kickoffs, field goals, extra points, the stuff between the quote-unquote real plays. And within special teams, there's a whole shadow world of hyper-specific jobs that the average fan has probably genuinely never thought about. Let's look at the long snapper. Every time your team punts the ball, and in a typical NFL game, that happens, 5 or 6 times, there is one person whose entire job is to hike the ball backward 15 yards to the punter. And it may sound fairly easy, but because of the way they're positioned, they're essentially upside down, looking at the world through their own legs and throwing the ball backward semi-blind. Once they've snapped that ball backward, they immediately have to block the defensive lineman barreling at them, trying to get to the punter with the ball. Now, they don't have to be the best tackler, and there are rules to ensure they don't get hit, but all of this happens in less than 2 seconds. This was not always its own dedicated roster spot. It only became a specialized position in the early 1970s when a Washington Commanders coach named George Allen gave the roster spot to a center named George Berman specifically for this role. Before that, the team's regular center just did it, and apparently did it badly enough that someone decided we need a specialist. Now, every NFL team carries a dedicated long snapper. And the perk of the role is that if you're good, you can stay with one team your entire career, and you can have a very lengthy career. Let's take Patrick Mannelly. He did this for the Chicago Bears for 16 seasons. He was never traded, and most Bears probably couldn't tell you his jersey number. It was 48, by the way. I looked it up. Or look at Josh Harris. He was with the Los Angeles Chargers, and he described the mental discipline of the job this way, and I love this quote. His old special teams coach used to say, "Good, bad, or indifferent, get to the next play. Because you might throw a perfect snap, make a perfect block, sprint downfield, make the tackle, and it's still just, yeah, but you have to do it again. No one celebrates. No one notices. You just have to do it again. Few of these players ever make the highlight reel unless it's a gaffe. But here's what you should remember. Maybe their jerseys aren't the most popular, and maybe most fans can't name their favorite team's long snapper. But that player touches and affects the ball on almost every kicking play in a game. They are a key reason why a team wins, why they advance down a field, and why they maybe even make it all the way to the Super Bowl. And often, we don't even remember them. Let's go to hockey now, where we have two different flavors of unsung heroes who are both technically on the team while also kind of really not being on the team. First, the Black Aces. In the NHL, during the Stanley Cup playoffs, which are happening right now, the Black Aces are minor league players who get called up to an NHL roster to basically serve as emergency depth once the trade deadline has passed. They can participate in the playoff bonus pool, and basically if someone goes down with an injury, the Black Ace gets their moment. Now, honestly, most of them never get that moment. They work out, they practice, they watch the game, they go home. But occasionally, the stars align. Let's go back to 2020. The Stanley Cup playoffs are happening in Edmonton. The Dallas Stars are playing the Colorado Avalanche in Game 7 of the second round. Joel Kiviranta is a 24-year-old Finnish forward. He is undrafted, and he spent most of his year in the hockey minor leagues, but he is in the bubble as a Black Ace. His job is to stay ready and probably not play. But then the Stars forward gets injured, and Joel draws into the Game 7 lineup after sitting out the first 6 games of the series in his first playoff game of significance in a Game 7 against Colorado. He scored 2 goals, and then, with the Stars trailing the third period, he scored another goal to tie it. And then, less than 8 minutes into overtime, Joel scores the series winner. He became the first rookie in NHL history to score a hat trick in Game 7. He came to the game that night expecting to watch. He left a legend. Now, the second hockey role, the E-Bug, the emergency backup goalie. Every NHL team carries 2 goaltenders on its active roster. But the league also requires that at every home game, there is a third, last resort option in the building in case both of the team's goalies get injured. And here's the thing, this third goalie doesn't have to be a professional. So teams often reach out to local rec hockey leagues, and they find goalies, hobbyist, beer league, weekend warrior goalies who are willing to be on call. If they're selected, they are the team's E-Bug. They have to sign a 1-day amateur tryout contract, and they don't get paid, but they get the possibility of an opportunity. I actually know someone who is the San Jose Sharks E-Bug. His name is Steve Minch. Steve and I were at Michigan State University at the same time. We didn't know each other, but he played hockey for the Michigan State Spartans. And I used to have posters of all the MSU sports teams on my dorm wall, including, at one point, the hockey team. Steve and I ended up working on the same team at Salesforce a few years back, and I used to joke that other people on our team may be better writers or slide creators than me, but I was confident I was the only person that had a photo of Steve Minch on their dorm room wall. Anyway, most of the time, nothing happens with E-Bugs. They watch the game, they have dinner, they go home. Sometimes, though, both goalies do go down, and someone has to go in. Scott Foster was a 36-year-old accountant in Oak Park, Illinois. He played goalie at Western Michigan University before eventually joining a rec league at a rink a few blocks from the United Center, which is where the Chicago Blackhawks play. His wife actually convinced him to put his name in as an emergency backup goalie. On March 29th, 2018, both of the Chicago goaltenders got injured. The starting goalie went down during warm-ups, and the backup got hurt with 14 minutes left in the third period. Scott, per his obligations, was eating dinner in the press box, his usual routine, because usually he wasn't needed. Not this night. He got the call, suited up, faced 7 shots, and stopped all 7. The crowd was chanting, "Foster!" and the Blackhawks coach was seen laughing on the bench as Scott skated past him to warm up. When asked about his strategy for defending the shots after the game, Scott said, "You just kind of brace yourself and hope for the best." Chicago won that game, 6-2. 2 years later, almost the exact same thing happened, but kind of weirder. David Aries was 42 years old and a Zamboni driver for the Toronto Marlies, the minor league affiliate of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He had also been a practice goalie for the Leafs organization for years. On February 22nd, 2020, the Carolina Hurricanes were playing the Maple Leafs in Toronto, and both of Carolina's goaltenders got injured during the game. Now, Carolina didn't have e-bugs at that game because it was an away game. David was sitting alone in the media room when his phone blew up. He hadn't even seen the footage of the second goaltender going down. But someone walked in and told him he needed to get ready. He allowed goals on his first 2 shots. Then he stopped the next 8. The Hurricanes ended up winning 6-3, thanks to David, the opposing team's Zamboni driver. In fact, David was wearing a Toronto shirt underneath his Carolina jersey while he played. He was named the #1 star of the game, and he became the oldest goalie in NHL history to win his regular season debut. Now, here's the sad part about this role. Starting with this upcoming NHL season, the e-bug program is actually being replaced. Each team will now be required to employ a full-time traveling backup goaltender. So the era of the accountant and the Zamboni driver stepping in is officially over, which makes people like Scott and David even more mythological. They had these once-in-a-lifetime experiences and then went back to their normal jobs. There are no jerseys with their names. Maybe they were featured in a few highlight reels, but they were key players that came through in key moments. Okay, we're going international now. Cricket. And before you reach for the skip button, stick with me. You don't need to understand cricket to love this story. You just kind of need to understand this idea. In cricket, there is a position whose entire job is to fail slowly. Let me explain. Cricket is played between 2 teams of 11 players. The batting team sends 2 players out to the field at a time, 1 at each end of the field, and they take turns hitting the ball and running. When one batter eventually gets out, for whatever reason, they go back to the dugout and the next player comes in. Test cricket is the longest form of the game, and it is played over 5 days. Crucially, play stops at the end of each day and picks up the next day. So imagine it's near the end of day 2. One of your batters just got out. You have, 5 minutes of play left before the day is done. Do you send out your next best batter, someone who you're counting on to be able to play tomorrow, to face those players for 5 minutes and maybe bad light and under a lot of pressure? Because remember, if for some reason that batter gets out in those 5 minutes, you've now lost 2 crucial batters in one afternoon. Most captains would say it's not worth sending in that next best batter out, but you have to send someone out. So you send the night watchman. The night watchman is typically a player who is lower in the batting order and sent in to absorb those dangerous few minutes at the end of the day. Their job is not to score runs. It is simply to not get out and to protect the better batters until next day. There's no real upside. If they get out, they failed. If they survive, nobody really notices. The whole role exists to be a human sacrifice. And every once in a while, the night watchman does something nobody expected. Jason Gillespie played for Australia's cricket team, and he would be the first to tell you he was not a batter. His career batting average, or the number of runs he scores per time he gets out, is 15, which is, for context, very low. Australia was playing Bangladesh in what was Jason's farewell tour. He was 31 years old, past his peak, and this series was always understood to be his final one. Late on day 1, Australia's captain sent Jason in as night watchman. The job was the usual: survive until he gets out, which was ideally the next day. Just survive until the day is done and go back to the hotel. Jason didn't get out. The next day, he was still there. He reached 50 runs, which is impressive for a night watchman, but not unprecedented. The day after that, he was still in the game, and he reaches 100 runs. That is rare. And then, and I want you to understand what I'm about to tell you has happened exactly once in over 140 years of Test cricket. Jason scores 200 runs as a night watchman. His 201 not out, meaning he was never dismissed or got out, is the highest score ever made by a night watchman in Test cricket history. Almost 17% of all the runs Jason scored in his entire international career occurred in that last inning. So the night watchman's job is to fail slowly and protect someone more important. Most of the time, that's exactly what happens. But Test cricket is a 5-day game, and 5 days is a long time for the universe to decide It wants to reward someone completely unexpected. Let's move to soccer. Quick context in case you don't know. In soccer, matches that are still tied after extra time go to a penalty shootout. I'm sure we've all seen these at some point. 5 players from each team take turns shooting from the penalty spot. The goalkeeper tries to save the shot, and whoever scores more wins. They're incredibly electric and tense, and they're a blast to watch. So if you've never watched one, I don't know, go find a YouTube video and take a 5-minute break. Now, in a penalty shootout, a good penalty-saving goalkeeper can completely change the outcome. Here's the thing most people don't know. You are allowed to substitute your goalkeeper during the match, including deep into extra time, specifically to bring in someone you think is better at saving penalties, even if that person hasn't played a single minute to that point. It's been done, but no team has ever done it as deliberately or as successfully as the Netherlands in the 2014 World Cup. In July 2014, the Netherlands and Costa Rica have played 120 minutes of football. It's tied 0-0, and they're going to a penalty shootout. With 1 minute left on the clock, the Netherlands head coach makes a substitution. He pulls his starting goalkeeper, Jasper, and brings on a man named Tim Krul, the backup goalie. Tim has watched the entire match from the bench. The whole Costa Rican bench looks confused. Who is this goalie? And the commentators start scrambling to figure out what's happening. Here's the part that makes this extraordinary. The Netherlands head coach and his goalkeeping coach had secretly been planning this for 6 weeks. From the moment the World Cup squad was named, they identified that none of their 3 goalkeepers were naturally dominant at saving penalties. So they spent hours studying each goalie's psychology and technique and decided that Tim, a big physical goalkeeper with a pretty aggressive mentality, had the right mindset to disrupt the shooters. They told Tim the night before the match that if they went to a penalty shootout, they would put him in. They did not tell their starting goalie, so he wouldn't have it in the back of his mind while playing. So Tim walks onto the pitch, and then he does something else. Before each Costa Rica player steps up to take their kick, Tim walks toward them and trash talks them to their face, individually, before they kick. "I don't think I did anything wrong," he said afterward. "I just told them I knew where they were going." He saved 2 penalties, and because of him, the Netherlands won 4-3 and moved on to the World Cup semifinals. Now, he played 0 minutes of football in that match. He just jogged on, saved 2 penalties, and jogged back off. And many soccer fans know about the penalty specialist goalkeeper in theory, but what the Netherlands team did was take that idea and plan it in advance. They kept it secret from their own starting goalie, and they executed it on the world's biggest stage against a team that had no idea what was coming. That is what happens when someone takes an unsung and unique role and capitalizes on it with a little bit of planning and a little bit of nerve. Now let's go over to boxing, and specifically the MMA, where there's one of the most high-stakes, least discussed roles in all of professional sports, the cut man. Let me set the scene. You've been watching a boxing match. It's round 7 of 12. One of the fighters takes a bad elbow to the eyebrow and a cut opens up. It's not life-threatening, but it is bleeding. And when you're getting punched in the face for a living, a cut over your eye becomes a problem very quickly. Blood could get in the eye, and if the ringside doctor decides it's too bad, the fight gets stopped. When the bell rings to end the round, the fighter has 60 seconds to rest and recover. And that is when the cut man goes to work. In 60 seconds, the cut man has to assess the cut, stop the bleeding, reduce the swelling, and apply the right combination of materials. Maybe that's ice-cold steel paddles to bring the swelling down, or coagulants to stop bleeding, Vaseline to protect the area. He needs to make it so the fighter can go back out there. If they do their job right, the fighter goes back out and nobody thinks about it again. If they fail, the fight can be stopped. A career-defining moment can end not because the fighter lost, but because someone in the corner couldn't manage a wound in time. And the work starts before the fight even begins. A cut man studies the fighter's face prior to the match. They look at old scar tissue, previous cuts, weak spots around orbital bones. They apply Vaseline preemptively to the forehead and eyebrows to help punches glide rather than cut. They are reading a map of the fighter's face and always thinking about what might go wrong. Chuck Bodak worked as a cut man for over 50 world champions, including Muhammad Ali, Evander Holyfield, and Oscar de la Hoya. Go look up the fights those men had and ask yourself how many of them might have ended differently if a cut couldn't be closed in time. And the one thing worth knowing about MMA versus boxing, in the UFC and most major MMA promotions, cutmen are provided by the promotion itself, not by any one fighter's corner. So the cutman is a neutral party. Every fan watching a boxing match sees the corner. They see the trainer yelling advice. Maybe they notice the water bottle or the other members of the crew, but nobody is thinking about the person with the ice pack and the Q-tip who just bought their fighter another round or two by doing invisible, precise, medically complicated work in less time than it takes most people to make a cup of coffee. The cutmen don't win the fight. They just make it possible for someone else to. Over to baseball for our second to last one. Every major league hitter needs to get their swing loose before a game. They need to see pitches and not the terrifying 95-mile-an-hour pitches they'll see in the actual game, but controlled, consistent, hittable pitches. Pitches that let them find their rhythm and their timing and their groove all prior to the game starting. This is a job for the batting practice pitcher. Their job is to throw 60-mile-an-hour strikes. Clean, consistent, pitch after pitch after pitch strikes. And they have to do this for hours every day over an entire season. They can throw hundreds of pitches a day. And keep in mind, most starting or closing pitchers rarely go over about 85 pitches before they're pulled. Mike Ashman is the Los Angeles Angels' full-time batting practice pitcher. He throws to Mike Trout and the rest of the Angels lineup before every game. That's his job. And here's what makes it actually hard. You can't just show up and throw 500 pitches a day cold. So Ashman spends every winter throwing at the exterior walls of empty warehouses. Just him and a bucket of balls and the side of a building. He builds his arm back up slowly, pitch by pitch, so he's ready when spring training starts. Only 9 MLB teams employ a full-time batting practice pitcher. The others use coaches, bullpen catchers, and other various staff to fill the role, but the teams like the Angels that have dedicated specialists swear by it. And it's because they're not just giving the rest of the team batting practice. They're giving the rest of the team that mental and physical confidence to walk into the batting box facing a guy throwing a 97-mile-an-hour fastball and feel ready. That's a psychological service as much as a physical one. So the batting practice pitcher, he'll never be in a box score. Probably will never appear in any highlight. But every time a hitter has a good game, they are, in some small way, describing the work of that 60-mile-an-hour specialist throwing at a warehouse wall in November. Finally, lacrosse, and one of the most specialized positions in all of team sports, or at least I think. Quick context, after every goal in lacrosse is scored, play restarts at the center of the field with a face-off. 2 players, one from each team, crouch down at the center X. They have their sticks on either side of the ball. The referee blows the whistle, and both players try to win control of the ball. This requires speed, leverage, grip strength, body positioning, and split-second reaction. Whoever wins the faceoff wins possession, and possession in lacrosse, like in basketball, is everything. At one point, teams started to realize, what if we had someone whose entire existence on the team was winning faceoffs? That is called the FOGO position. Face-off, get off. The FOGO comes on for the face-off. They win or lose the ball. They immediately substitute off the field. They go back to the bench. They wait for the next goal. They come back, face off, leave the field. Rinse and repeat. Some FOGOs almost never play otherwise. Their entire contribution to a game might be 6 to 10 seconds, repeated a dozen times. And the position is so specialized that the best FOGOs often come from entirely different sports. Wrestlers are some of the most successful face-off specialists because the hand fighting and explosive ground-level competition translates really well into lacrosse. There was a FOGO at Yale who played lacrosse and was a standout wrestler before he became arguably the best college face-off player in recent history. He won over 77% of his draws. But here's the thing. A really good, really dominant FOGO can essentially create free possessions out of thin air. Every time your team scores, if your FOGO wins the next faceoff, you get the ball right back. So it becomes this make it, take it lacrosse. And the NCAA actually banned the faceoff entirely for 1 year in 1980 because dominant faceoff specialists were judged to have too much influence on the outcome of the game. During that year, teams inbounded the ball after a goal like in basketball, and apparently it was a disaster. Teams hated it, players hated it, fans hated it. So the faceoff came back the very next season. So the FOGO never scores. They barely play. The NCAA tried to remove them from the sport. And teams still know that if you have a dominant FOGO, you have an enormous advantage. The most important player is sometimes the one that gets the least playing time. All right, let's land this plane. Every single role I've talked about today was invented or formalized because someone realized this matters enough to be someone's whole job. And here's the thing that they all share. They are invisible until they're not. The long snapper is invisible until the snap sails over the punter's head and everyone gets mad. The e-bug is invisible until both goalies go down. And then suddenly, for one terrible or glorious moment, everyone knows exactly who they are. Which brings me back to where we started. Trey Rogers grows and studies grass. His work was always good, but few people knew about it until FIFA came calling. That's the deal that some of these people make. If they're doing their job well, they're invisible. You and I barely know they're around, but they carry years, sometimes decades, of information and wisdom. And when they finally do decide to hang it up and retire, they'll be leaving some really big shoes to fill. So here's what I'll leave you with, and it's not really a sports question. Who is the Trey Rogers of your life? Who is the long snapper in your life? Who is doing the invisible, precise, thankless thing that makes everything else work and nobody really notices? And more importantly, do they know that you see them? That's it for today. Thanks for being here. I'd love to hear your own unsung hero, whether it's a sport I covered or one I didn't. Drop it in our social channels. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for spending time with us in the middle. If today's story caught your attention, drop a subscribe, share the episode, follow us on social media, and remember, it ain't over till it's over.